I am 55 years young, and he is 24. A tale of genuine betrayal unfolds. The house always carried an air of silence, a stillness that lingered before the arrival of guests. I navigated the rooms with purpose, as if readying myself for the arrival of a significant guest, though the identity of this visitor eluded me, slipping through my mind like sand through fingers. It had been years since our paths last crossed, back when he was just a teenager, navigating the twists and turns of life, still on a quest to discover his true self. Once I heard whispers of a man, older now, transformed in ways I could hardly fathom. Yet I held on to the memory of how he gazed at me, not with the eyes of a child towards an adult, but as if he were peering into the depths of something secret and elusive. On that day, I found myself tidying the guest room thrice, not due to any mess, but rather because restlessness coursed through me. I glided my fingers along the edge of the shelf, a familiar spot where he would set down his backpack during those cherished summer visits. The aroma of freshly laundered linen wafted through the space, hinting at new sheets and the promise of fresh starts, perhaps. From the depths of the kitchen cabinet, I selected a mug for him, an old relic adorned with a faded green rim, whispering tales of days gone by. It wasn't until I was setting it down on the table that I discovered it was his favorite. As he stepped into the scene, time seemed to elongate, each second unfolding like a delicate petal. As my husband swung the door open, I lingered just behind him, cloaked in the dim embrace of the hallway's shadow. Then I took a step into the unknown. He stood with a height that commanded attention, his frame robust and solid, yet his movements were measured and deliberate. His eyes retained that same hue, yet there was an edge to them now, a keen awareness that seemed to pierce through the ordinary. With a gentle embrace, he offered a compliment, saying, "You look good." With a smile, I offered a response that danced around the edges of clarity. Yet, a moment of stillness lingered. A moment hangs in the air, thick with unvoiced understanding, shared by two souls who sense they've traversed an unseen boundary long before their greetings even begin. Dinner unfolded like a grand performance. My husband shared the familiar tales he often told. I absorbed the words, acknowledging with nods at the appropriate times, feigning laughter when the moment called for it. Yet, from across the table, I sensed his gaze upon me, not a stare, but a quiet acknowledgement. My fork quivered ever so slightly as I lifted it toward my lips. I convinced myself it was the wine. As the evening unfolded, with the flickering images of an old film casting shadows in the living room, I quietly slipped away to the sanctuary of the bathroom. I lingered before the mirror, captivated by my own reflection, more than I typically would be. The illumination lacked charm. However, I examined my face with a sense of detached curiosity. The delicate traces that dance around my eyes. The gentle embrace that time bestows. Not in a negative sense, just distinct. My hands glided softly over the gentle curve of my neck, tracing the line of my collarbone. I was not in search of beauty. In my quest, I sought a sensation that had long eluded me, a feeling buried beneath the sands of time. Desire. Thump. A flicker of light. As the night drew near, I found myself retreating to my bed, a throbbing ache in my head urging me to seek solace in sleep. The reality was that I simply couldn't endure another moment sitting beside both of them on that couch. The disparity between the one I possessed and the one I dared not even envision began to resonate with an overwhelming intensity, even amidst the stillness. As I lay in bed, my mind wandered to the countless years that had slipped by, unnoticed, while I remained oblivious to the contours of my own body beneath the sheets. It was not that. My husband lacked kindness. He existed. Yet kindness does not stem from desire. Comfort is not flame. Long ago, I ceased to anticipate anything more than a gentle goodnight kiss and the soothing rhythm of breath beside me. As dawn broke, I found myself stirring from slumber earlier than I typically would. I devoted additional moments. As I selected my attire, I reminded myself it wasn't about impressing anyone, it was simply about feeling a change within. Once, I chose a blouse that had long been forgotten in the depths of my wardrobe, its fabric whispering secrets of the past as it caught the light, revealing a hint of its sheer elegance. I adorned myself with a fragrant essence. Not much, merely enough to sense its existence. As I stepped into the kitchen, he was already present, barefoot, savoring his coffee, bathed in the gentle morning light. Light streamed through the window, creating a warm, golden glow upon the wooden floor. He cast a glance in my direction, then shifted his gaze to the mug cradled in his hand, the very one I had chosen, and a faint smile crept onto his lips. My beloved entered the room. Moments later, shattering the stillness. We shared tales of errands, the whims of the weather, and our dreams for the weekend ahead. Yet my thoughts wandered, gathering pieces, the arc of his forearm as he extended for a spoon, the subtle shift in his voice as it lowered when he greeted the day with a soft, "Good morning," the faint stubble on his chin a testament to the passage of time, a reminder of the boy he once was. Throughout the day, I wandered the house, as if seeking an escape from the closeness, yet I found myself unable to silence the anticipation of his footsteps, my gaze drawn to the windows, searching for his reflection. Perhaps it was merely a whisper of nostalgia, a warped reflection of days gone by. Yet nostalgia fails to tighten your gut. It doesn't cause your breath to catch when someone glides by you. Within the corridor. That night sleep eluded me. With bare feet, I ventured into the kitchen, yearning for water, for clarity, for anything that could quench my thirst. Once more, he stood there, bare-chested, partially facing the open fridge. He gazed into my eyes, a spark igniting in the shadows, and an unspoken connection flowed between us. Silence envelopes, only warmth remains. I pivoted and departed in silence. Reclined in the comfort of my bed, I gently placed my hand upon my chest. My skin radiated warmth, my pulse a gentle rebellion. Eyes shut. My gaze meets the horizon, and I allow the stillness to guide my journey ahead. Not drifting into slumber, but rather into an eerie, hushed yearning that had eluded me for decades, a yearning that filled me with a fear deeper than anything I had ever dared to acknowledge. And I felt it deep within, that this was merely the start of an unfolding tale. That morning, I found myself struggling to rise from the depths of slumber. My body sensed the call to awaken, yet my mind lingered in resistance. My head throbbed as if the night had been a journey, not of restful sleep, but of navigating through a tempest within. I remained motionless for a time, gazing at the ceiling, anticipating a change in the air around me. In the stillness of the house, silence enveloped every corner. My husband had already departed. He consistently found a way to slip away early, lost in the depths of his own imagination. We had drifted into distinct rhythms long ago, not from discord, but from a serene acceptance. Softly, I descended the stairs, my bare feet whispering against the cool surface, each step taken with a gentle deliberation. The kitchen was filled with a refreshing breeze, the windows ajar just enough to let in the gentle whispers of the outside world. Upon the table lay a neatly folded newspaper accompanied by a note from my husband. "Departed for a few days, are we? The conference has been extended. A delightful meal awaits you in the fridge." It was the kind of thing you could see coming from a mile away. There was no trace of anger within me towards him. He wasn't unkind or aloof, rather, he was just missing in ways that held more significance than either of us cared to acknowledge. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma anchoring me in the moment, and just as I turned, he strolled in, still wrapped in the remnants of sleep, clad in a t-shirt and loose sweatpants. His hair was a wild mess, and his face bore the marks of neglect. He appeared almost vulnerable, his expression too vivid for this house, too full of life. "Good morning," he said, his eyes narrowing just a bit against the bright sunlight. I nodded, striving to maintain a calm facade, yet the intensity of his gaze felt like a whisper against bare skin, subtle, not inappropriate, but undeniably electric. I found myself questioning whether he was engaged in a game, or if I was merely envisioning an elderly woman yearning for recognition. But then, what had drawn me to this specific brow that morning? Why had I stood in front of the mirror and run a fingertip down my waist, not for him, not for my husband, but for the part of me that yearned to experience? The day revealed itself in peculiar, fragmented instances. Our words were few, yet the quiet vibrated with an electric intensity. As I swept the porch in the late morning, the sun cast its golden rays across the wood in thick, warm strips. He ventured outside, extending a hand to assist. I gracefully turned it down. He appeared unbothered, simply resting on the steps, leaning back on his hands, and staring up at the vast expanse of the sky. It was a simple act, but witnessing him perform it awakened something profound within. The form of his arms, the gentle curve of his chest beneath the cotton, intricate details that lingered in my thoughts, uninvited yet captivating. And yet there they stood. I convinced myself that it was all just a figment of my imagination. This couldn't possibly be real, it just couldn't. Yet, denial offers little solace when your body has already begun to respond, long before your mind has had the opportunity to voice its objections. That evening, I uncorked a bottle of red wine, a bold, dry vintage we had cherished for years, simply for the sake of the moment. Specific purpose. A bottle crafted to honor a day that has yet to unfold. This day, in its own way, seemed to hold a special significance. Would you care for a glass? I inquired, my voice unwavering. He gave a subtle nod. Once more, we found ourselves on the porch. The light beyond was gently transforming into a warm, golden hue. I set the scene with soft melodies, something timeless, devoid of lyrics, just the gentle piano that enveloped us like a tender sigh. Our words danced lightly between us, but they were few. The elements danced in the sky. Once upon a time, in a bustling metropolis, individuals who had faded away from our existence long ago. Yet, the silences that lingered between the words were laden with unexpressed emotions. He absorbed my words with a depth I hadn't felt in years. Not with courtesy. With a captivating presence. His silence enveloped me, grounded me, and unraveled me in a single moment. As I rose to. As she departed, he remained standing as well. Near. Nearer than ease ought to have permitted. I remained steadfast. His hand brushed against mine, a deliberate touch. Gently, as though bracing for dismissal. I remained still. We gazed at one another, not with shock or fear, but with the hushed ruin of souls who had stepped beyond a boundary. Then he pressed his lips against mine. It unfolded with a calmness, unhurried and free from desperation. It was intentional. Soft and soothing. A kiss that posed the question I found myself unable to answer, yet deeply reluctant to refuse. My body reacted with an alarming swiftness, almost as if it had a mind of its own. Crimson surged through my senses. My skin ignited, tender and alive with sensitivity. It had been ages since I experienced a kiss like that. Not as a partner, not as a duty, but as a hidden truth. I was the first to pull away. Neither from guilt nor from shame. Simply a gut feeling. I stepped inside, my legs trembling, my breath faltering. The atmosphere within felt denser. More inviting. I made my way directly to the bathroom, where I gazed at my reflection once more. Not with judgment, but with a sense of loss. My fingers brushed softly against my lips. They shimmered with a delightful sensation. I was unable to let it slip from my mind. I had no desire to. That night, I found myself wide awake. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, gazing into the abyss of darkness as the echoes of memory danced across my skin. I found my thoughts drifting away from my husband. Not because my heart didn't hold affection for him, but because, in that fleeting moment, there was another soul within these walls who had awakened a sense of self in me over the course of 2 days, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. This was not confusion. This was no mere coincidence. I sensed it was the dawn of something new. And I had come to understand that beginnings are seldom free from the shadows of what has come before. The morning unfolded in a silence that weighed more than the ordinary, as if the very air had thickened during the night. I lingered in bed longer than usual, attuned to the distant sounds of the house, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the soft footsteps from the floor below, and now and then, the quiet thud of a cabinet closing. The world carried on, yet within me, a stillness had taken hold. The recollection of his lips pressed against mine lingered softly, a gentle warmth beneath my skin. It wasn't the sort of kiss that left a mark, but rather the kind that nestled in the nerves, weaving through the creases of memory, replaying at the most inconvenient moments. In the stillness of the night, I found myself roused from slumber more than once, the resonance of that moment lingering in the air. Like a secret I couldn't contain. As I descended the stairs, I found the air had transformed into an oddly courteous ambience. There he sat at the table, savoring his coffee, engrossed in his phone with a serene composure that left me pondering all that was around us. Did it hold less significance for him? Or was he, much like myself, feigning that nothing had transpired simply because we were at a loss for what to do next? I prepared the tea, my actions automatic, acutely conscious of the fabric of my robe gliding over my legs, of the bubbling water, of the rhythm in my throat. Every part of me resonated with a heightened awareness, as if each sensation was amplified, more alive than ever. I remained silent before him. I was unable to. Not in that moment. The fleeting semblance of tranquility was short-lived. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, my husband reached out with a call. He conceived a notion, one of those impromptu inspirations he deemed enchanting. "Let us venture to the lake house," he proposed. "Just the 3 of us, to breathe in the fresh air and embrace a change of scenery. It shall bring benefit to each and every one of us." I ought to have declined. An excuse should have been at the tip of my tongue, waiting to be spun into a tale. Yet I lingered in my indecision, and that was all it needed. As the afternoon sun began to dip, we found ourselves gathering our bags, readying for the next chapter. As I observed my hands delicately folding clothes into a small suitcase, a sense of surreal detachment washed over me. The blouse felt too soft, the dress too fitted, each piece a whisper of a story yet to unfold. I found myself selecting items not for their comfort, but for their appearance, as though I were getting ready for a grand performance. For an experience that transcends a simple family weekend. The journey to the lake house unfolded in a serene hush, occasionally punctuated by my husband's musings on the road work, the shifting weather, or the melodies drifting from the radio. I found myself in the passenger seat, stealing glances at the rearview mirror more often than was perhaps wise. He lounged in the back, his gaze drifting out the window, one arm casually resting across the seat. His expression was a mystery to me. He felt a calmness wash over him. Not apparent. Yet, with each subtle movement of my shoulder, and every glance cast down at my lap or out into the distance, through the window, his presence enveloped me, a tingling sensation like static dancing across my skin. The lake house remained untouched by time. Familiar, creaky steps. Once again, the familiar rusted wind chimes sing their haunting melody. The air was imbued with a subtle scent of pine mingling with the essence of aged furniture. It was a realm brimming with echoes of the past. Gatherings filled with laughter over sizzling grills, the soft patter of rain on windows, and serene nights spent lost in stories and friendly competition. A location that had once symbolized tranquility. We slipped into our familiar rhythm, embracing our customary roles with ease. My husband took it upon himself to tidy up the fireplace. I carefully unpacked the groceries, revealing each item like a treasure waiting to be discovered. He lent a hand in gathering the wood. Everything appeared ordinary on the outside, yet underneath flowed a current too powerful to overlook. At dinner, the three of us gathered around the table, weaving tales and sharing laughter that felt almost authentic. I observed them both, taking in the contrasts that set them apart. My husband's voice, calm and inviting, flows gently without a hint of haste. His eyes held a warmth, yet they seemed to gaze beyond my presence, as if searching for something far away rather than truly seeing me. Then the younger man leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes sparkling with a certain intensity that appeared as though acknowledgement. Once the meal had concluded, I found myself in the kitchen, a solitary figure amidst the clatter of dishes. I immersed my hands in the warm water, letting the soothing heat linger longer than it perhaps should have. The unmistakable creak of the floorboards echoed behind me, and I felt no need to glance back to confirm it was him. Silence enveloped him. He lingered just behind me, not near enough to make contact, yet close enough to render the air between us thick with tension. With a deliberate motion, I dried my hands, savoring each moment. My breath came in fits and starts, and I loathed how unmistakable it seemed. I reached for a towel and turned, discovering him nearer than I had anticipated. Our eyes met, a silent exchange unfolding between us. His gaze held no hint of playfulness or flirtation. It was a hushed moment, filled with gravity. Uncertainty clouded my mind, and the thought of probing his thoughts felt too daunting to entertain. Instead, I gracefully stepped aside, my shoulder lightly grazing his in the snug confines of the kitchen. That fleeting moment of connection ignited a warmth that spiraled down my spine. He remained still. I chose not to say I'm sorry. As the night deepened, the power suddenly flickered and vanished into the darkness. There seems to be a fuse issue, my husband mumbled. He stepped outside, flashlight in hand, casting a beam of light over the box, grumbling softly about the age-old wiring and the storms that had come and gone. As I perched on the edge of the bed, shrouded in near darkness, the gentle patter of rain began to dance upon the roof, weaving a soft melody that filled the air. And then he emerged in the doorway. He wandered without shoes, clad in a simple t-shirt and relaxed trousers. The glow from the corridor illuminated the outline of his face emerged, casting the rest into obscurity. Silence enveloped us. He rested against the door frame, exuding an air of belonging, as if he were patiently awaiting something significant. With a hesitant rise, I found myself grappling with the unfamiliarity of my own form. Every step taken in his direction seemed to belong to another soul entirely. Yet I embraced them regardless. As I approached him, there was no contact between us. We were not required to. Our breaths intertwined, measured and deliberate. I could sense the rain clinging to him, the warmth of his presence enveloping me. Skin merely inches away from mine. A voice echoed from downstairs, belonging to my husband. There's a tale woven around the breaker. We drifted apart before we had the chance to truly unite. The moment passed, yet it lingered on. That night, I found myself nestled in bed, my husband beside me, as the rain whispered against the window, mingling with the gentle wheeze of his breath and the serene hush of the world enveloping us. Yet my thoughts wandered to distant realms. It lingered in the space between heartbeats, in the inches that had yet to close between us upstairs, in the silence of a threshold not yet crossed but no longer behind me. In that moment, I realized this was more than mere temptation. This was the spark that ignited the journey. And I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wished to bring it to a close. The rain held its presence throughout the night, spilling into the early morning, transforming the scenery surrounding the lake house into a gentle haze of gray and green. Mist enveloped the trees, caressed the windows, and clung to every surface, as though the very world had been swathed in delicate gauze. I stood barefoot by the kitchen sink, fingers wrapped around a cup of black coffee, watching droplets slide slowly down the shimmering crystal. Every one ventured down its unique journey, tentative and unsure, much like myself. I had awakened before either of them. Restless in the familiar confines of a bed that once felt like home, now a space that wraps around me like a heavy blanket, stifling and overwhelming. It was not my husband's fault. He was innocent of any wrongdoing. Yet, perhaps that was the crux of the matter. He had not taken any action at every single one. I reclined next to him the night prior, attuned to the steady cadence of his breath, the subtle whistle that danced in the air. In his nose that had once grated on my nerves and now only intensified the profound solitude. His body radiated warmth, his hand inadvertently grazing mine in the shadows, yet an icy chill enveloped me. I spun around. She drifted away from him, yearning for sleep, much like one yearns for forgiveness, holding on to hope, yet fully aware that it may never come to arrive. As the floorboards groaned above, I remained still, my heart racing in the silence. A well-known rhythm of footsteps, gradually slowing down, more substantial than normal, revealed to me it was him. He refrained from stepping into the kitchen. Not just yet. I felt his presence close by, a gentle shadow, honoring the space I hadn't requested for, yet somehow yearning to traverse it on my own. And I yearned too. The part of me that had lain silent for years now awakened with a restless energy. It opened my eyes to the world around me, to the way my shirt clung to my skin in the thick humidity, to the sensation of the elastic of the fabric snug against my waist, a gentle reminder of its presence, as I felt the familiar curve of my back when I stretched to grasp something perched high on the shelf. It was not a matter of vanity. It was a revival. After breakfast, my husband proposed the familiar routine. Tasks, duties, and the hustle of daily life. He was perpetually in motion, tirelessly repairing, and diligently upholding the facade of functionality, as if a tidy gutter or a well-organized toolbox might just be the secret glue that keeps a marriage intact. I acquiesced, driven by habit, weighed down by guilt, compelled by a sense of duty that had long since lost its nobility. Yet when the idea— it was the younger one who suggested we drive to town to pick up new paint for the back porch, and I didn't hesitate. It will be quicker with two, he remarked, his gaze fixed not on me but on the aged railing beyond the window. And you know how he wanders off in the hardware store? My husband let out a hearty laugh and gestured for us to move along. Feel free to take the SUV. The journey into town unfolded in a silence that felt rich and full, not devoid of meaning. It was rich, brimming with unspoken tales. Every now and then, a sentence drifted through the air, weaving its way between us. Observations on the trees, reflections on the condition of the road, and the soft melodies drifting from the radio. Yet, all of it was inconsequential. I felt the space that lay between us, the way his hand hovered near the gearshift, while mine remained tightly held in my lap, a conscious choice. The town was quaint, tranquil, and well-known. We paused at a quaint corner store to gather our supplies. Tools of creation, rolls of adhesive, containers of color. He bore the weight of it all, unassisted and resolute, his shirt clinging to him from the gentle, persistent drizzle that danced from the sky. I observed him as he hoisted the boxes into the trunk, the sinewy muscles in his arms flexing beneath the fabric. Is this truly merely about paint? I inquired abruptly, my tone softer than I had intended. He faced me. No, he replied. But it's the place we find ourselves. It was not a mere game of flirtation. It was not a dance of allure. It was truthfulness. And it caused an unexpected tightness in my chest. As I journeyed back, the road gracefully wound around the shimmering lake, with trees stretching their limbs overhead, creating a lush, verdant passage. The golden light danced through, gently caressing the windshield with its warm embrace. I extended my hand to reposition the sun visor, and in that moment, My fingers brushed against the space between us, hovering near his. Neither of us stirred, caught in a moment that felt suspended in time. The silence deepened, not stifling, but rather close and personal. My breath caught in my throat as I stole glances at his profile, drawn to the strength it exuded, the quiet restraint that enveloped him, and the way his jaw tightened when he drifted into his thoughts. I felt the urge to speak, to share my thoughts, yet I found myself simply resting my hand softly atop his. It was not a daring gesture, hardly a gesture at all, yet he turned his hand over with deliberate slowness, and gently encircled my fingers with his. I sensed the warmth of his skin, the texture of his palm against mine. No one had reached out to me in that way for years, not with such ease, such awareness. My heart raced more than it ought to have, and I pulled away after just a brief moment, yet that feeling lingered with me throughout the entire journey home. Upon our return, the house lay in a serene hush. My husband had ventured into the shed, engrossed in the task of mending a broken window latch. As I immersed myself in the task of arranging the groceries, I meticulously placed each can on the shelf, one after another, fully aware that the sequence held no significance. He stepped into the kitchen, pausing in the doorway. "I'll begin with the porch," he said, taking his time. He averted his gaze, not entirely meeting my eyes, yet I understood his unspoken words. I nodded, my hand still cradling a jar that I had yet to release. My heartbeat resonated in my ears. The atmosphere surrounding us had grown dense once more. As the afternoon waned, I ascended the stairs, solitude my only companion. There was a pressing need to transform my attire, to cleanse my visage, to inhale deeply once more. In the quiet solitude of the guest bathroom, I found myself leaning against the sink, gazing into the mirror, reflecting on the image before me. The mirror was gently veiled in a soft fog, a whisper of warmth lingering in the air. I cleared it away, gazing intently. My blouse clung to my collarbone, damp and heavy with the weight of the moment. I unbuttoned it slowly, my gaze fixed on my own hands as they moved with deliberate care. This morning, I chose a soft lavender lace bra without a second thought, yet it suddenly felt like a revelation waiting to be shared. I removed it and adorned the space with a new one, vibrant and full of promise. Dark, understated, elegant. Not out of any grand design, but rather from a deep-seated desire to experience something new, to feel alive, to awaken a sense of longing within myself. From below, his voice reached my ears. Not the words, just the cadence. I was not interested in the meaning of his words, I simply craved the sound of them lingering in the air. In that moment, I understood just how effortless it had become to drift into contemplation, to succumb to yearning, to engage in little rituals that felt more suited to someone on the brink of change rather than a woman anchored in a stable marriage. I had shed the mask of pretense. I was getting ready. And the most troubling aspect? I felt no shame. I experienced a surge of vitality. On that night, silence enveloped us. As we gathered for dinner, we settled into our familiar spots, my husband unaware of the unspoken exchanges, the space that felt both vacant and brimming between me and the man seated across from me. As I settled into bed, I reclined fully dressed. The window stood ajar. The trees danced gently in the breeze, while the night insects serenaded the darkness with their hum. I chose to remain awake, resisting the pull of slumber. Within my chest, a fracture had already begun to unfold. And the moment had passed, leaving no chance to seal it once more. I stirred before the dawn broke, my senses sharp, even though slumber had eluded me. The sheets enveloping me were a chaotic mess, soaked in the lingering warmth of a night filled with restless contemplation. The space beside me on the bed lay vacant, a silent testament to his absence. Faintly, I caught the sound of his footsteps echoing downstairs, accompanied by the familiar morning symphony of cupboards creaking open, drawers whispering shut, and the kettle warming up with its gentle, steady hum. I lingered in bed longer than I ought to have, my body weighed down yet buzzing with an elusive energy I couldn't quite identify. The burden of everything left unspoken, everything left undone, pressed against my heart like an unyielding tide, relentless and ever-present. My hand lay gently on my stomach, as if attempting to calm the swirling emotions within, yet it was not discomfort that stirred inside me. It was a feeling of eager expectation. As I finally rose, I navigated my morning routine like an actor preparing for a role I had yet to grasp. In my selection, I found a black dress, elegantly simple yet perfectly tailored, its neckline dipping just low enough to remind me to stand tall and poised. Underneath, I donned the soft, charcoal gray lingerie I had once acquired in a fleeting moment of daring, a treasure that had remained untouched until this very trip. The fabric embraced my skin, wrapping me in a sensation that anchored me, making me acutely aware of each breath and every subtle shift of my body. The morning meal unfolded in silence. My husband lingered at the table, engrossed in his emails, a half-empty cup beside him. With a mug in his hand, I poured the coffee, took a seat beside him, and let the silence weave its tale around us. He spoke to me in that calm, pragmatic manner he always employed, inquiring if I would be interested in assisting with the replanting of the garden beds later. Contemplating whether we ought to tidy up the boathouse before the winds of change sweep in. I acknowledged, offered gentle responses, and smiled at just the right times. He remained oblivious to the way my fingers clutched the cup with a fierce intensity. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, he set off to see the neighbors across the lake, cherished companions who always opened their doors for lengthy discussions about politics and climate and renovations. He inquired whether I would like to join him. I graciously turned it down. Embrace the afternoon, he urged. Take a moment to pause. And then, for the first time in days, the house fell into a profound silence. I lingered in the living room for a moment, gazing into the void, lost in thought. The shadows danced differently since our arrival. The light streaming through the windows had transformed, taking on a softer, more golden hue, as if it were cradling a hidden secret within its glow. I sensed the warmth of the sun embracing my arms, filtering through the fabric of my dress, and I allowed it to seep into my being. Skin, akin to an invitation. He discovered me outside. The gentle creak of the back screen door whispered through the air, followed by the quiet hush of his footsteps gliding over the grass. I did not spin about. There I was, perched upon the humble stone wall that bordered the garden, my hands gently resting on my knees, while my gaze wandered over the shimmering water. In the distance, it shimmered, tiny waves reflecting the light as if they were breathing. He approached yet remained silent. I felt his gaze upon me, even without turning to see. Not in the way a man observes a woman he longs for, but in the way someone perceives an object of fascination. They are unable to escape the depths of their emotions. Are you all right? He inquired softly. I turned to him. All my defenses had crumbled away. No, I replied. It was the most straightforward truth I had ever permitted myself to express. Years. He lingered beside me, a quiet presence, neither touching nor pushing, simply existing in the moment. The closeness of him was overwhelming in its tenderness. My fingers felt like ice resting on my lap, even as the sun blazed overhead. I found myself uttering words I didn't truly mean, though deep down, uncertainty lingered about what this really was anymore. He remained quiet, yet his silence spoke volumes. It was a presence. It was attentive. I turned to him. Our faces hovered in proximity, rendering words unnecessary. There existed neither a courteous withdrawal nor a secure expanse. Only we remain, caught in the delicate balance between what has been and what is destined to come. And then, our lips met in a tender embrace. It lacked gentleness. It was bold, unlike the first time. It was a surrender, breathless and immediate, fueled by days of restraint and a quiet ache. My hands found their way to his shoulders, while his settled at my waist. His fingers wove into the fabric of my dress, and I sensed the tremor that coursed through him, reflected in my own being. Our lips met as if we were characters in a tale already written, bound by a choice we had yet to fully comprehend. Not yet. Yet, when it came to a close, we remained still. We lingered in proximity, our foreheads almost brushing, eyes gently shut. The breeze whispered through the branches overhead, bringing with it the sweet melodies of birds and the earthy aroma of wet pine. I imagined that guilt and shame would wash over me. Yet, what washed over me was a sense of clarity. Neither joy nor solace. There was a piercing realization that everything was on the brink of transformation, and deep down, I had longed for this moment. We returned indoors, silence enveloping us like a thick fog. There was no need for me to inquire about his feelings. I had already known. His silence had shed its shroud of enigma. It was a revelation. I wandered through the rooms of the house in a peculiar tranquility, as if they were the domain of another soul. I ventured into drawers that had long been untouched. Years passed as she gently smoothed the blankets on the guest bed, rearranging a vase of wildflowers by the window with care. Each movement resonated as a tribute, an homage to the life I once embraced and the one that was slipping away from my grasp. When my husband returned later, he was in high spirits. He shared tales of the neighbor's new puppy, the wine they had uncorked, and the yarn spun about a sailboat ensnared in the weeds. He remained oblivious to the tightness in my shoulders, to the way I flinched at his attempt to sweep my hair aside. He pressed his lips gently against my cheek before ascending the stairs to cleanse himself. I found myself in the solitude of the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall, my heart thumped like a hidden truth yearning to be revealed. On that enchanting night, he concocted a delightful surprise dinner. He prepared a meal, a rare occasion for him, and adorned the table with flickering candles. And utilizing the linen napkins we reserved in a drawer for special occasions. He was making an effort. I witnessed that. Perhaps he had an inkling, or perhaps he was merely attempting to grasp at something elusive. We had both released our grip on the past long ago. The dinner unfolded in a hush, filled with kindness and gentleness, yet it carried an utterly devastating weight. I felt an aching certainty deep within me, a knowing that I didn't wish to be touched by him that night. The night. Or maybe never again. Not due to his shortcomings, but because another had touched me in a realm I thought had long since faded away. Once he drifted into slumber, I quietly slipped out of bed and stood by the portal to the outside world. Outside, the lake sparkled beneath a slender beam of moonlight. I stood there in silence, my arms wrapped. Encircling me, adorned in the delicate lingerie I had worn throughout the day. I held back my tears. I remained still. I gazed at the shimmering reflection of the stars dancing upon the dark water, pondering how something so tranquil could evoke such a sense of peril. As the sun crept into the room, I found myself waking late, my body heavy and unwilling to stir. It was as if a part of me understood that stepping into the light of awareness would bring with it the burden of unspoken choices, lingering in the shadows of my mind. The atmosphere in the room hung heavy, a lingering reminder of the windows sealed tight against the outside world. I rose gradually, my fingers gliding over my thighs, seeking to anchor myself in the present, yet my thoughts lingered in another realm, caught between the lingering warmth of yesterday's kiss and the quiet that enveloped it. Once more, the house fell into a serene silence. The absence of my husband had become a mere whisper in the fabric of my days. He frequently departed early, meandering towards his little endeavors, to his toolbox and weekend lists that had transformed into his method of occupying the voids I no longer filled. As I slipped into a cozy cardigan, draping it over my nightgown, I made my way down the stairs, the soft, distant hum of a radio wafting from the shed, weaving a gentle backdrop to my descent. He found himself in the open air. It seemed I could avoid crossing paths with him, at least for the time being. The kitchen was alive with the lingering essence of last night's wine, subtle hints of garlic, lemon, and the warm embrace of melted wax weaving through the air. He had made an effort. The table remained untouched, one plate lingering in its unwashed state, a crumpled napkin resting where my fingers had gripped it tightly while he recounted the tale of his friend's retirement celebration. I had smiled. I had given a slight nod. I had even chuckled once, the sounds slipping from my throat like a stranger in the night, unexpected and strange. He remained oblivious to the subtle retreat of my hand when his lightly grazed against it. Or perhaps he had seen it and decided to turn a blind eye. I brewed tea instead of coffee, something gentler, something free from bitterness. I settled into my spot by the window in the back room, where the view stretched out to the trees that framed the path leading to the water. On that day, warmth enveloped the world, the air dancing with the sweet promise of summer's embrace. The leaves outside danced gently in the breeze, casting their shadows upon the ground in soft, unpredictable patterns. I had yet to lay my eyes upon him, the one whose silence had started to resonate more profoundly than anything I had encountered in years. I reassured myself that it was for the best, that we both required a moment to exhale, to allow the weight of what had transpired to find a place that felt bearable. Yet, the reality was that the waiting felt akin to being submerged beneath the waves. I had to catch a glimpse of him, not for words, not even for a touch, but simply to reassure myself that he still existed in the world we had woven together in that fleeting, unforgettable instant. It was almost noon when I first caught the sound of his footsteps ascending the stairs. Bright, intentional. I remained in my seat, my gaze locked onto the trees. I remained still, yet I sensed his presence the moment he stepped into the room, the atmosphere around me transforming with his arrival. At first, he remained silent. He glided toward the counter, filled a glass with water, and lingered there in quiet contemplation. I observed his image in the mirror, the strain in his shoulders, the deliberate manner in which he set the glass down. In his every movement, there lingered not a whisper of that kiss, no hint of giddy indulgence, nor a trace of reckless pride. Just a certain kind of quietude. In a moment suspended in time, anticipation lingers in the air. At long last, he pivoted. He paused for a moment, his voice steady and soft, as if sharing a secret. "I've been thinking," he said. I allowed him to share his words. I remained silent. "This can't go further," he said. I wish to avoid causing him any pain. I wish to preserve whatever this is, whatever bond you share with him. A chill coursed through me, as if a stream of icy water flowed beneath my skin. I remained composed, my exterior betraying nothing. And yet, he pressed on, I cannot feign that it never took place. Or that I wished to prevent it from occurring once more. There it was, the truth, cloaked in subtlety. A revelation tempered by restraint, yet sincere enough to leave a mark. I chose to remain silent in response to him. I found myself unprepared for what lay ahead. Instead, I rose and exited the room softly, making my way to the upstairs bathroom where I secured the door and leaned against it for what felt like an eternity, allowing the stillness to envelop me completely. As the afternoon wore on, I meandered through the rooms of the house, drifting aimlessly without a clear intention. I gently brushed away the dust from a shelf that was perfectly fine, and I took the time to rearrange the books scattered across the bedroom. His sanctuary? In that moment of uncertainty, I paused. The door stood ever so slightly ajar, inviting curiosity and whispers of what lay beyond. Within the room, the bed lay neatly arranged, the window slightly ajar, and the curtain danced softly with every whisper of the wind. As I entered, a mysterious force beckoned me forward, its allure both captivating and enigmatic. A jacket rested on the chair by the closet, waiting to share its tale. I glided my fingers over the fabric, a whisper of his scent drifting up gently. Wood, soap, and an elusive element that danced just beyond my grasp. Not fragrance, merely essence and moments. I perched on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and gazed down at the ground. I held back my tears. I found no desire within me. Yet, within my chest lingered a certain emptiness, as if something had been hollowed out, and had not yet begun to regenerate. On that enchanting night, we gathered once more to share a meal together. My husband was filled with joy, sharing his thoughts of prolonging our adventure for a few more days, of completing the deck, a welcoming space, beckons old friends to gather for the weekend. I offered a smile at the right moments, handed him the bread, and inquired about the forecast. I stepped into the character I had prepared for so long, yet with each gesture, I sensed a growing distance from my true self. He, seated across the table, averted his eyes from mine. Not with a chill, nor with fury, but with a struggle that hurt me deeper than any denial. In those silences, we were crafting something profound, not a chasm but peril. Each glance we withheld, every unspoken word, it all contributed to the heaviness of the unutterable. The more we turned away, the more it echoed in our minds. As the evening unfolded, I began to shed my layers for. In the quiet of my room, I found myself gazing into the mirror, where my reflection awaited the very same lingerie as the day prior. It held fast to my skin, woven with memory, not with longing. With great care, I removed it, layer by layer, as though I were shedding a version of myself that had long since ceased to belong. I slipped into a well-worn cotton nightgown, a fabric that whispered comfort, a garment that cradled me in its gentle embrace. My partner had already. As I nestled into bed, sleep gently enveloped me. I extinguished the lamp and nestled onto my side, my eyes wide open, observing the shadows dance and settle in the stillness around me. In the depths of slumber, he extended his hand, a gentle caress against my hip. I stood my ground. I chose to remain silent. Yet, I remained at a distance, not daring to step closer. Outside, the night embraced warmth, while the trees whispered with secrets they were destined to hold. And in my chest, a subtle ache began to stir. It wasn't from loss, but rather from the gradual realization that I could no longer maintain the facade of a life that had ceased to resonate with my true self. I had become all too familiar with this silence, the sort that lingers between those who once danced to each other's rhythms, now traversing the same spaces. Like phantoms. Yet, that morning carried a different weight, a heaviness in the air as if it had thickened overnight, and I was the sole observer of this subtle change. The light outside shone with a clarity and brilliance, untainted for the first time in days. I opened the window in the bedroom and stood there, allowing the air to envelop me, yet it failed to bring me any comfort. It served as a reminder that I remained present, still entangled in a narrative that had slipped beyond my grasp. Downstairs, my husband was weaving a gentle melody. An extraordinary occurrence. His voice flowed softly, lacking melody, yet brimming with satisfaction. I absorbed the cadence of his footsteps, the soft scrape of a pan on the stove, the metallic clink of a fork against a bowl. The warmth of home should have wrapped around it like a cozy blanket. Once upon a time, in a world filled with wonder, there existed a tale waiting to be told. A narrative that beckoned to be unraveled, inviting listeners to embark on a journey through its twists and turns. Each word woven together, creating a tapestry of imagination and intrigue, ready to captivate the hearts of those who dared to listen. It simply was not. As I stepped into the kitchen, he greeted me with a warm smile. "Behold, what I have discovered," he proclaimed, lifting it high. A gleaming silver lighter. "It does not belong to me." Discovered it nestled in the back seat of the car while I was rearranging the fishing gear. I sensed it before it even crossed my mind. A subtle, barely noticeable change within my heart. My stomach knotted with tension. I held my expression steady. "Perhaps it was one of the neighbors," I suggested. My voice flowed steadily, yet my throat felt parched. He simply shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. It might be. He placed it gently on the counter, allowing silence to envelop the moment, never to speak of it again. Yet I recognized that gaze. The manner in which he gaze held for a moment, stretching the silence. He spun around swiftly, feigning indifference, as if the topic had lost all significance. It was the manner in which individuals organize matters they are not yet prepared to face. I had experienced it far too often to not see it for what it was. He departed after breakfast, mentioning that he would be away for the majority of the day. Perhaps some repairs at the dock, followed by a delightful lunch with a companion in town. I pressed my lips to his cheek, a gesture born from routine. My lips grazed his skin ever so lightly. And then, I found myself in solitude. I was uncertain about the whereabouts of the younger man. Vanished. His chamber lay bare. There were no traces of him in the shed, by the lake, or along the path we often walked. Strolled. His absence resonated more profoundly than one might expect. It carried a sense of purpose, a shield against the world. I held no blame against him. I found myself uncertain about the words that would escape my lips if our paths were to cross. Once more. The language was starting to fade, supplanted by fleeting looks, pauses, and the delicate dance of evasion. I roamed through the house, lost in thought. My body shifted, yet my mind remained captive to that solitary vision, the lighter resting on the counter, my husband's hand cradling it, and the stillness that lingered between his utterances. As the sun began to dip in the sky, I caught the sound of the front door creaking open. I remained still. I lingered in the sunroom, enveloped by the lingering aroma of freshly cut blooms and the gentle sway of the wicker chair beneath me. He slipped in with a hushed grace. Silence reigns, yet the essence lingers. I tilted my head just enough to recognize his presence. He lingered in the doorway, a figure caught in the balance of hesitation, unsure if he belonged in this moment. "I had to go," he said simply. I acknowledged him with a slight nod, my gaze drifting elsewhere. "I understand." As he entered the room, the floorboards groaned softly under his weight, and the air hung heavy with unspoken words, taut and fragile, a testament to everything left unsaid. "He has a feeling that something is amiss," I murmured. He responded, as I had anticipated. We slipped into silence once more, yet this time it carried a different weight, one that felt less like separation. It was as if a deep sorrow enveloped them, two souls lamenting the loss of a future they had never envisioned yearning for. I rose to my feet and moved past him, neither hurrying nor extending my hand. I hesitated. With a gentle step, I ascended the stairs and quietly shut the door behind me. I found myself perched at the edge of the bed, gazing intently at my hands. In this light, they appeared more aged, with veins standing out and skin seeming more delicate. Yet, in recent days, they had encountered experiences that rekindled a sense of youth within them. Once more. Starving. Regret lingers in the air, a whisper of what could have been. The packing left undone, the plans that never took shape, the choices that remained unmade. A tale of missed opportunities unfolds, echoing the weight of hesitation. Yet, in place of that, with a gentle tug, the drawer of the nightstand creaked open, revealing a pen and a sheet of paper waiting to be summoned into action. To refrain from penning a letter. Not at this moment. To bear the significance of etching symbols on a page while your own existence began to fade into obscurity. He arrived upstairs without a sound, slipping into the space like a whisper in the night. Unbeknownst to me, the door creaked open without a sound. Yet when I raised my gaze, he was there, poised just within the threshold of the room, his expression a mystery waiting to be unraveled. "Tomorrow, I shall take my leave," he declared. The words fell heavily, creating a chasm between us. "For eternity?" I inquired. He gave a slight nod. A lengthy silence lingered between us, not awkward but painfully intense. "I wish for you not to," I expressed, my tone gentle. "I understand," he replied, "but it's something I must do. I find myself out of place in this realm." I never did. I approached him with deliberate steps, my hands quivering as I extended them toward his face. He remained still. I glided my fingers along the curve of his jaw, descending to the expanse of his chest. His heart pulsed beneath my palm, a hidden truth yearning to be remembered. Our lips never met. We did not share a warm embrace. We lingered in that space, two souls adrift in a house that had lost its warmth, enveloped by a silence that spoke volumes of the unspoken truths we were too afraid to articulate. That evening, I found myself beside my husband on the porch. The heavens stretched wide and unblemished. The stars twinkled brightly above the lake, a vast and infinite tapestry stretching across the night sky. He filled our glasses with wine, and we settled into a silence that only those who have shared many years together can truly appreciate. He wove tales of aspirations for the autumn. During the winter holidays, perhaps it's time to breathe new life into the boat that has lingered untouched for far too long. I gave a nod, offered a smile, and spoke just a few words. I could feel the cool glass resting in my hand. As I took a sip of the wine, its rich flavors danced upon my palate. In the quiet embrace of nature, I beheld the trees standing tall, the stars twinkling above, and the delightful crinkle of his eyes as laughter danced upon his lips. I witnessed every moment unfold. And yet, in a realm beyond the surface, I found myself wandering in a different place altogether. Not with him. Not with the one departing. Yet with that fragment of my being that I could no longer disregard, the woman who had existed in silence, in compliance, for an eternity too vast. That night, as I nestled into bed beside my husband, I sensed his hand reaching for me once more. His hand lingered momentarily on my waist. I stood my ground. I chose to remain silent. Yet, my gaze remained wide awake long after his had drifted into slumber. And in my chest, a fire ignited. Not with remorse. Not even with sorrow. Yet, with the certainty of a truth that could no longer be delayed. I rose before he did. My body glided with purpose, each movement a whisper in the stillness. I quietly slipped out of bed, mindful of the gentle weight of his arms draped across the sheets, not wanting to disrupt the serene moment. It had lost its intimacy, becoming merely a routine, akin to a piece of furniture you've grown accustomed to navigating around. I slipped into a silk camisole and draped a cardigan around my shoulders, not out of chill, but because my skin felt bare in a manner that transcended the temperature of the air. With quiet steps, I made my way to the kitchen, shrouded in darkness, avoiding the flicker of any lights. The dawn was draped in a tapestry of deep blue shadows, lingering like whispers of the night. I lingered by the window, observing as the sky gently softened, gradually unraveling the night. The silhouettes of trees grew clearer with each fleeting moment, and the world surrounding me started to regain its essence. In that clarity, there lingered an unsettling quality, a resurgence of edges, of definition. As the light inched closer to the house, the facade grew increasingly difficult to maintain. He was departing. The thoughts swirled in my mind, a continuous flow without pause, either a question nor a statement, merely a heartbeat of contemplation. He was departing. I brewed tea, allowing the ritual to anchor my spirit. Heat the water until it bubbles, allow the leaves to unfurl their essence, and with a gentle touch, press the spoon against the cup's edge. I cradled it in both hands, allowing the warmth to seep into my palms. The house whispered softly in the stillness, as if it too had grown tired of the quiet that enveloped us. I was unaware of the hour he descended the stairs. I sensed the subtle scrape of his footsteps, yet I remained still, my gaze fixed ahead. I was unable to. The mere echo of his presence had the power to unravel me completely. At first, he remained silent. He simply lingered by the entrance, observing me from afar. I sensed his gaze traverse the room, lightly brushing over my shoulders, lingering in the stillness of certain spots. He was etched in my memory. After breakfast, he mentioned that he was packing. I inclined my head gradually, my gaze averted from him. My throat was constricted by an emotion too ancient to be labeled as sorrow and too well known to be named. Trepidation. Are you really not going to join us for dinner? I believe it might be best if I refrained from doing so. I longed to plead with him to stay, to shout it from the depths of my being, yet a heavy burden settled in my chest, silencing my voice as if my words were trapped like stones submerged in water. I found myself unable to rise above the depths. I found myself at a loss for words. He stepped out of the room. I chose not to follow. In the stillness that followed, I caught the faint sounds of drawers sliding open, the unmistakable zip of a suitcase being closed, and the soft thud of an object being dropped and then picked up again. I envisioned him meticulously folding his clothes, just as he always did. I envisioned his fingers gliding over the edge of the nightstand, perhaps pausing for just a moment. Perhaps not in the slightest. I pondered whether he would seize it all or perhaps leave a fragment behind. Once upon a time, there was a toothbrush, a solitary sock, and a lingering scent that danced through the air. As the late morning sun filtered through the windows, I made my way upstairs at last. My feet danced to a rhythm of their own, as if guided by an unseen force. The door to his room stood ajar, inviting curiosity and whispers of untold tales within. Sunlight danced through the curtains, casting stripes of gold upon the bed. There it was, his bag, standing sentinel by the wall, tightly closed and holding secrets within. He sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed on the floor, lost in thought. As he lifted his gaze, his eyes revealed a weariness, yet they held a firm resolve. "I don't want to go," he murmured softly. "I understand," I replied. My voice scarcely escaped the confines of my lips. He rose and approached me with deliberate slowness, as if gauging the resilience of a delicate bond that lingered in the air between us. As he approached, there was no contact between us. He lingered near, allowing me to sense the warmth of his breath brushing against my cheek. "Speak if you will," he urged. "I find myself at a loss for words, yearning for you to remain," I whispered. He cast his gaze downward. I sensed a change within him, that subtle surrender that unfolds when a person relinquishes a struggle they never wished to engage in. "He promised to keep you in his thoughts." "That's merely a statement, not a vow. It is an undeniable truth." And then, he pressed his lips against mine. It unfolded in a way that was unlike before, neither frantic nor pressing, but achingly gradual. Like a fleeting moment captured in the act of unfolding, already beginning to fade as it takes shape. His lips were soft, his hands resting lightly on my waist, as if he feared I might shatter. As he withdrew, I kept my eyes closed, savoring the moment. I wished to hold on to the memory of him in that way, near, alive, and unfinished. By the time the sun reached its zenith, he had vanished into the ether. There was no farewell to my husband, no words to explain. Only the soft hum of the car engine and the gentle crunch of gravel filled the air. And then silence fell. I held back my tears. I lingered in the hallway by the front door, my gaze fixed on the spot where he had stood just hours earlier. A few moments later, my husband came back with groceries, his voice echoing through the kitchen as he called my name. I responded instinctively, rose to my feet, relieved him of the bags, and remarked on the tomatoes being overly soft. A smile graced my lips at just the right moments. I followed every step laid out before me. As the evening unfolded, we gathered by the warm embrace of the fireplace, the wine poured generously, and the logs danced with a crackling melody. He extended his hand toward mine, and I willingly allowed him to grasp it. His thumb glided gently over my knuckles, and in that moment, I sensed the passage of time, the accumulation of birthdays, holidays, intimate dinners, and the rhythm of aging routines. Yet I sensed a void, not merely from the departure of the man, but from the very essence of who I was. Of the woman I had briefly become, in the shadows of my own heart. The woman who lived her life unapologetically. As the night draped its velvet cloak over the world, I found myself surrendering to the embrace of sleep, retreating to my slumber long before the stars had fully taken their places in the sky. He lingered in the lower level, engrossed in the pages of his book. As I stood before the mirror in the bathroom, I gently unpinned my hair, observing the delicate strands cascade over my shoulders. My reflection gazed back at me, a silent inquiry lingering in the air, one I found myself unable to unravel. Within the confines of the drawer, I discovered the lavender lingerie that had remained untouched since the early days of the journey. I glided my fingers over the delicate lace before gently closing the drawer once more. As I nestled into bed, my gaze drifted upward, fixated on the ceiling above. In the stillness of the house, a profound silence enveloped the space. As my husband turned the page of his book downstairs, a distant car glided along an empty road, taking with it a fragment of myself that I had only just begun to uncover. The morning that followed his departure unfolded like any other day. On the table lay toast, while coffee brewed in the pot. The familiar creak of floorboards echoed underfoot, and the wind whispered through the trees outside the window. My husband sat across from me, engrossed in the newspaper, a subtle crease forming on his brow as he murmured about politics, the weather, or perhaps the neighbor's broken fence. I acknowledged with a nod at all the appropriate moments. Once, a smile graced my lips. Yet the stillness within me had transformed, no longer echoing the familiar calm of days gone by. The stillness had transformed, no longer just a pause in time. It was the stillness that follows. I observed the steam rise gracefully from my cup, swirling and dissipating into the air, vanishing without a trace. It brought to mind the way something could exist with such fervor and then vanish, leaving no sign behind. Not in a physical sense. He had departed, leaving in his wake a solitary toothbrush, a mismatched pair of socks, and a book marked by a folded page, whispering tales of moments shared. Yet the aura, the spark, the gravity of being acknowledged, that had slipped away into the ether. Or perhaps I had concealed it, buried it deep enough to continue on, to press ahead without visibly coming apart at the seams. On that day, my words were few. My husband took note, yet not in the way that truly counted. He inquired whether I felt weary, if there was anything I required. I declined. I claimed I was all right. He embraced it, much like he embraced the many facets of life, as if minor discomforts were simply the inevitable companions of growing older. Yet, it wasn't weariness that silenced my voice. It was the moment I understood that I had navigated two distinct paths simultaneously, and one of those journeys had just concluded, quietly and without fanfare. I approached my tasks as if I were weaving a tapestry, each thread carefully placed in a dance of purpose and intention. With careful hands, I folded the laundry, arranging the dishes in the cabinet with precision, and swept the porch, each task a small chapter in the day's narrative. In a moment of determination, I took the time to repot a struggling plant that had found its home on the windowsill. Each movement was deliberate, infused with intention, as if the cadence of everyday existence might somehow shield the present from the encroaching shadows of what once was. Yet it did bleed. Not in overt manners, not through tears or admissions. It bled in the way my gaze hung on the vacant chair he once occupied. As I lingered at the foot of the staircase, I strained to hear the footsteps that would remain forever absent. It seeped into the choice of underwear I wore beneath my jeans, in the way I absent-mindedly brushed my own wrist, recalling how his fingers had lingered there. As the sun dipped low in the sky, I found myself within the confines of his room. The window remained ajar, the curtains dancing gently in the soft breeze. The bed was neatly arranged, the blanket stretched taut over the mattress, yet his fragrance lingered in the atmosphere, subtle yet undeniable. I lingered on the edge of the bed, my hands resting in my lap, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. As I reflected on the moments that had passed, I pondered the choices I could have made. Should I have invited him to linger a little longer? Or perhaps, should I have chosen to walk away with him? Yet, in the depths of my mind, those musings felt distant, almost like echoes of a dream. They were the dreams we weave for ourselves in the aftermath, gentle echoes of defiance that linger in the imagination. The reality was both more straightforward and harsher. Once more, I found myself embracing this existence through inaction. As my husband sought me out, I casually mentioned that I was in the midst of organizing linens. With a warm smile, he gave my shoulder a gentle pat and mentioned he would be outside tending to the gate. And just like that, the moment slipped away, fading into the background. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself in the kitchen, preparing a meal that was both uncomplicated and comforting, a taste of home. He praised the seasoning and inquired if I would like to share a viewing experience later. I agreed, fully aware that I would not follow through. I sought the framework, not the closeness. I had to embody the role until it resonated within me once more. If it ever could. Once he had settled into his slumber, I made my way back to the sunroom. I settled into the chair, a familiar spot where my gaze had once wandered beyond mere trees. The sky loomed darkly, with stars barely visible, shrouded by a delicate veil of clouds. I held back my tears. I chose not to write. I found myself seated, absorbing the whispers of the night, the rhythm of my breath, and the restless part of my being that would not be silenced. I contemplated him, not as I once did, devoid of the pangs of yearning or the craving for touch. I reflected on the person I had become in his company, the woman who had leaned in during our talks, who had laughed freely, unbothered by the world around us, who had reached out to touch a man's face not from obligation or routine, but from a place of genuine understanding. Her absence weighed heavily on my heart, leaving me to ponder whether she could truly find a place in this life filled with its endless routines, roles, and expectations. Yet I realized that she had lived, if only for a fleeting moment, with a brilliance that would forever remain etched in my memory. Eventually, I made my way upstairs. My husband lay in slumber, facing the wall, one hand gently resting on my side of the bed. I eased myself in beside him, taking great care not to disturb his slumber, hesitant to break the silence that hung between us. In the stillness of the night, I found myself gazing up at the ceiling, lost in thought. The silence returned, yet this time it felt transformed, light and freeing, rather than oppressive. It was calm, it was expansive, and within its embrace, I sensed a gentle change, a release, a tender easing. The tale had reached its conclusion, yet the union remained intact, as did the life I had crafted. It was the narrative I had harbored in silence, the essence of who I had discovered, if only for a fleeting instant. Perhaps that was sufficient, or perhaps it wasn't. Yet, in that moment, I shut my eyes and let the silence embrace me, not as a form of punishment, nor as a weight to bear, but as a testament that even the stillness could transform a life.